woman, welcome back to Rise. And today I'm so excited about the topic we're going to be talking about because it's so relevant to me personally, and I'm sure to many of you too. So before I tell you what we're going to be speaking about, I want to introduce this beautiful woman. Her name is Juliette Bryant, and she's a leading figure in the field of health transformation. She has traveled the world seeking out and studying the most effective tools for achieving good health and healing. Juliette has spent years running women's circles and supporting women through all stages of their lives with nutrition, meditation, breath work, and awakening work. Juliette has 3 published books and written countless articles for magazines, newspapers, and journals, all arising from her extensive research into healthy living, well-being, and nutrition. So help me welcome Juliette into this wonderful conversation. Hello, Juliette.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. And of course, there's so much alliance between what we both doing. And we just discussed in our conversation how we both travel the world and we're really seeking some expansion and getting more knowledge and insights into our soul journey. So I'm super excited about this conversation today. And I just want you to introduce the topic so that you can say it as well as you can.
Amazing. So today we're going to be talking about honoring and navigating the changing landscapes of our hormones into becoming that wild, wise woman. And it's something that for me, I'm going through at the moment. And I've worked with people for years in this journey, but until you actually hit that spot yourself and you're in that journey, you don't really understand it fully because you're not embodying it. And that's really where I like to teach from what I'm going through so that I can live and breathe my truth to everyone.
So exciting. I am also in that phase of my womanhood. So I cannot wait to dive into what you have to share with us all. So let's dive in.
Great. So one of the things that's so important is as we get older, whether you've been a parent or not, women are big givers. We have it in our DNA to nurture and nourish people, whether that's our children or our extended family or our friends or our work colleagues, whoever it is. We've got this desire to give and to look after, and quite often that comes at the detriment of ourselves. Most women overgive to others and feel guilty. We've been raised to kind of feel guilty about nurturing and loving ourselves unless something happens that knocks you off of your safety, like illness or something like that. Quite often breast cancer comes up for so many women because the breasts are about nurturing. So that can be something that throws people back into it. But if you haven't had anything, when you hit the perimenopausal shift, it's like the universe says, I believe, okay, enough now. You need to look after yourself. You need to reevaluate and you need to come back home to who you actually are, to what fills you with joy and what you really need and desire, and to focus on that soul's journey, that soul's progression, because it's kind of that marker, isn't it? It's like you're moving into an initiation to a new phase. And I think, we have these initiatory markers throughout our life. It's like when we first start menstruating, when we, first start making love, when we first have children, if we have children, all of these times are really a chance to reevaluate. And it's this deep initiation. And in ancient times, we would have actually marked these moments. But in our society, we don't. We've got programmed to just get on with it. Come on, just keep going, keep going, keep going. And I think from my experience, this is really where we struggle because we're not meant to keep going. We're not meant to move at 110 miles an hour. We're not meant to ignore the changing seasons, whether it's a monthly changing season or it's the bigger changing seasons like we're talking about now. And so this is what we're going to be looking at today. How can we navigate this? How can we really come back into that home so that we don't get all the negative experiences or we can look at them as signs of like, okay, I'm out of balance. How do I come back into balance? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I already, from my own little work with women at this stage, I've realized that those that get the harsh symptoms are really forced to stop, to reevaluate, and to create that balance. So I absolutely understand where you're coming from, and come on, give it to us. What do we need to do to really ease ourselves into that new phase of life with joy as much as possible?
I think one of the things to first address is, so often in our society we've become programmed with something's wrong. I'm feeling these symptoms that don't feel good, so I'm going to go to the doctor and I'm going to get a quick fix to get me out of it because I don't like this feeling. And, I want to go through what these feelings could be, first of all, because people might be listening going, well, I don't know what's perimenopause. I don't know if I'm in it. I don't know what the feelings may be. And they can vary from person to person. So quite often overwhelm and anxiety can suddenly come. You may be a person who's always been in control and suddenly you're getting panicky about the smallest little things. You've got this heat and this overwhelm that just washes over you and it's like, I can't cope. And I think that feeling of I can't cope is a very common thread. Obviously we all know about the hot flush thing. That's out there a lot, but not everyone suffers with hot flushes. But I think the anxiety overwhelm can be one of the biggest things. And a lot of people go to the doctors and say, I'm anxious, I've overwhelmed, and they get put on SSRIs or they get put onto the HRT. And not saying that for some people this might not be right. You have to follow your own path, but I truly believe that there are lots of other paths to explore before you go down those routes, but they're very often offered as the first route. Weight gain can be a massive one, higher stress levels, brain fog, just that inability to juggle all those balls that you were juggling before, aching joints, all of these things. And obviously then the irregular cycles, which are a kind of more obvious sign. But one of the things that happens is when we start to enter perimenopause, our progesterone and our estrogen start to drop off. Now, one of the interesting things is progesterone is a cortisol buffer. So cortisol is our stress hormone. So cortisol is the thing that we need to get us out of bed in the morning. It's the thing we need for our metabolism to work properly. It's the thing we need for clear mental cognitive function. It's the thing we need to regulate inflammation in the body. So there's a lot of different things that cortisol do, and it's very important. But there's a tipping point. And what happens is you get to a point where it's really important and you go over that point and suddenly all those things it was helping you with, it starts to do the opposite. So you get more inflammation, you get weight gain, you get brain fog, you get depression, anxiety, all these things we've been talking about. So quite often these are all a sign of too high cortisol. And why we suddenly get flooded with it is because as the progesterone drops, that is the buffer. So that's been keeping it in check. So it's just been like dampening it down that whole time, just keeping those stress levels running kind of evenly. But as that goes, it can't do that. So that's why we get this sudden anxiety, overwhelm, weight gain, etc. So one of the first things we need to look at is what is causing us stress in our lives. How can we reduce that stress? Can we come back into harmony more with ourselves by reducing stress? And it may be that you start to do yoga or you start to meditate. You go into nature and go for walks. A lot of people as they get older start going to the gym because they're like, I've got to combat this weight gain. And yes, it's great to start going to the gym. It's great to start doing weights. We need to have more of that resistance on our muscles so we build more muscle tone to help our bones and everything. But it can also have a negative effect on trying to lose weight because all of that exercise, what does it do? It creates more adrenaline, it creates more cortisol. So it's not going to help you lose that weight, especially around your tummy. It's that middle section that I'm sure we're all aware of. That's cortisol. That's an indication of too high cortisol. So the gym isn't necessarily going to help that, but walking in nature can really help it because what's happening is your cortisol is going, because you're in nature, So the negative ions of nature, so negative ions are when you're in a woodland or when you're by water, and it helps you to feel calm and relaxed. When you're sat by a computer, it releases positive ions, which make you feel stressed and angry. So that natural time recalibrates us. Also on a deeper level, when we're in nature, especially if we're barefoot, what's happening is we're replugging ourselves back in. So we're charging our battery. So we're electromagnetic beings. We've got a beautiful electromagnetic field. And when we're in concrete, when we're under strip lights, when we have air conditioning, all these things around us, this disconnects us from our battery source. So that time in nature really will fill us up on such a deeper level than just reducing the cortisol. So this is the kind of first part, reducing that cortisol. For me, I need to do more than that. I'm quite an adrenaline fueled person anyway. So some people, you know, for my work, I'm traveling around the country, speaking at lots of events, holding lots of spaces for people. So I have to have that adrenaline moving through me. And I've always been that kind of more active person. And that's where you can run into more trouble, because you run on that adrenaline more. And that's where the cortisol will kick up. So for me, having stuff like shilajit, I don't know if you guys have seen this. So this is amazing. So shilajit is a black tar that oozes out of the rocks in the Himalayas, and it's thousands of years old decayed plant matter. Have you worked with shilajit at all?
Not at all. This is a surprise for me.
So
tell me more.
When I was studying in India, I worked with a lot of Ayurvedic doctors, and we spent 3 years over there, and it was a beautiful experience getting to learn from them. And shilajit is the #1 Ayurvedic medicine. And it's not to be taken for people who are young, for like before you hit puberty. It's not good for you. But as you get older, it's amazing. Great for men, as it helps to regulate testosterone levels. But for women, what it does is it works on increasing libido. So that's the thing that can go for people as they get older. Their libido starts to go, because the body's like, well, I don't really need a sex drive because I'm not going to be creating babies anymore. So that natural kind of cycle moves out of the way. And that's part of the work I do a lot, is sacred sexuality work with people, to re-explore and recreate, how can I work with this sexual energy for me, not for it being about bringing a baby in, but for my joy, my pleasure, and my life force. So shilajit can be very helpful on that front. But what shilajit does, because it's a black food, is it actually brings cortisol down in the body, and it strengthens the adrenals. So your adrenals are 2 little glands that sit on top of your kidneys that produce the adrenaline and cortisol. And this is where people get exhausted, and they get things like adrenal fatigue and chronic fatigue syndrome and ME and all these different names. Their adrenals have just gone, I've had enough. I'm exhausted. You've given me too much caffeine and too much sugar, and you've not listened when I've said stop. And then they just go, I'm quit. And that's when we don't get enough cortisol to get out of bed or to do these things. So it's a beautiful balance, as everything is in life. It's finding what that resting point is in the middle, where we're in balance. So shilajit can be very, very helpful. What you do with shilajit is basically you get a kind of blob that is, so it's a black sticky tar. So you get like a small pea size amount, and you can put that into a hot drink. I add it to cacao because then you can't taste it. It's not the most pleasant of tasting things. I really love it now because I know how it feels inside my body and how much it's helping me. But when you first smell it, you're like, not sure about that. But it's a magical food. It's got 82 trace minerals. It's got fulvic acid, so it's helping to detoxify the body as well and remineralize, which is a really important thing. So those are a few of its kind of traits. So for me, reducing cortisol, bringing in, doing the walking, doing the meditation, doing yoga, having time in nature, bringing in the herbs like the shilajit and medicinal mushrooms for me are such a powerful tool to support my body, because we can't always do it just by ourselves. We need to sometimes bring in the allies that are around us, our plant and mushroom allies that are there to really help us. Bringing cortisol levels down, really key, because then you can start to think and see clearly as to, okay, cortisol levels are down. Now, what do I need to do? Now, what is the next step? And one of the most important things I feel is to start to view the relationship with your body in a different way. So what it's about is it's about starting to realize that this is our temple. It's not just a thing that's getting us from A to B that maybe is aching that we moan at. You know, quite often we have very negative relationships with our body because it might not be functioning as we want it to, or we don't have enough energy to do what we want, or we've got too much weight, or we've got wrinkles, or whatever it may be. But actually, one of the most important things to really navigate this time is to come into relationship with yourself, with your body, and go, this body has served me so well. Yes, it may have a few aches and pains as I've got older. Yes, it may have some stretch marks or some wrinkles, but they all tell a beautiful story. And when we can really go, this is the vessel that is here to help me communicate my soul's purpose with the world. Suddenly for me, it's like, well, how do I want to treat this? How do I want to look after this space that is such a gift for me to be here now on this planet? And I think when you can change that and go, okay, so if I was walking into a temple, whatever religion, whatever, you know, vibe, whether the temple is a beautiful forest space or whatever it is to you that you think of when you think of a temple. So if I was walking into a holy space, how would I want to be in that holy space? What would I want to do? What level of respect would I treat that space with? And then apply that to your body. So if this was a temple, I'd want it to look really beautiful, not as in externally, you know, I need to be beautiful, but I'd want to give it beautiful, soft, organic clothes that didn't have chemicals in. I'd want to give it the most beautiful food that, again, was organic and didn't have chemicals. I'd want to keep it as clean as possible because this is the offering to the divine. So then you can start to feel a slightly different alignment in your body. I don't know if you can feel that shift when you start to look at it in that way.
Absolutely. I love how you bring it, because you see, I think that in our society, especially emerging from years of patriarchy, and the media doesn't help with the images of what is the kind of ideal beauty should look like. And I think that we all a little wrapped up in a lot of external, you know, some validation or standards that are completely mutated and they don't apply to majority of women. And a lot of women thinking of themselves less than when they compare themselves to the kind of, you know, standards out there. And this is creating so much, I think, misery for women, where when they criticizing and judging their bodies based on those fabricated standards that are completely, I mean, you know, and I know that a lot of those women in magazines and social media, they've been photoed and brushed, and, you know, it's not real. It's not who we really are. And I think that for a lot of us, we grew up already not really evaluating, appreciating our own beauty. And then we age on top of it. And that is the big one, right?
Exactly. And I worked a while ago with this beautiful woman. She was more curvaceous and larger, and she had so little self-confidence, and she didn't feel sexy in herself. She didn't feel at home in her body. And so one of the things I got her to do, which was a beautiful exercise, was I said, what fabrics really make you feel sexy? Like, what makes you feel sensual? So I said, go out and buy some material. And when you're at home by yourself, play with these materials and move them around your body and float and, you know, have this beautiful feeling, and start dressing in this way that you can feel sensual within yourself, not for anyone else, but just for you. She said it really transformed so much for her because she suddenly wasn't doing it for external validation. She was going, what makes me feel great in myself? And that switch really changed things. And so for me, this honoring of our temple, you know, looking at this is our divine space. So how would I treat the divine? Because that's what I need to do for me. It's like when I'm making love, whether it's just by myself or with my husband, I always breathe in and I call in the divine feminine so that I can be an embodiment of that. So then it moves out of the ego into a deeper sense of connection. And I think the more we can do this in everyday life, I'm going to breathe in and become an embodiment of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. I'm going to find that sacred union within myself. Then so much of this stuff just falls away because we start to act differently. It's like a reprogramming of our mind. But on a physical level, you know, there are steps that we need to take, and there are things that can feel very overwhelming and confusing when we are in this changing landscape, because our brains maybe are fuzzier than normal. We're not thinking quite so quickly. We don't have that same level of energy. So, you know, as I said, bringing the cortisol levels down, having that time in nature. And I think one of the key things that for me really resonates is remembering the beauty of the nature we're not separate from, because we are part of this beautiful planet. So this is something that I come back to over and over again. I'm not walking on this earth. I'm walking in the earth. I'm part of this earth. And so as the leaves change, so my leaves change. As the trees grow and then they go back in and they change through all these beautiful seasons, so I do. And those seasons are something to be honoured, not to be feared. And we are in this phase of changing hormones, a changing season. And so that transition can be a little bit, okay, we're shifting. But what nature does is it prepares. So a tree in summer has loads of leaves on it. Those leaves are collecting the sunlight, bringing in all this beautiful energy to feed the tree. Now, as the sun starts to fade its energy, the tree goes, there's not enough sunlight to sustain me holding hundreds and hundreds of leaves. So I'm going to pull back my energy from the leaves into my core. That's when the leaves change color and fall. The tree still has all of its same energy, but it's refined it. It's brought it into its center so that it's strong in its core being. And I think this is really what we need to do as women as we enter this new phase. It's the time to shed all the things that we maybe are doing that aren't necessary for right now, the changing season. And it's refining it and going, I'm going to strengthen my core so that I can be really strong within this landscape. Not necessarily all of that out there. There may be time when my leaves come out again, but right now in this transition, I come into my center and I find out what brings me joy in each moment, smaller things. And that way, energy is much more conserved, but it's stronger and more focused because we've got this iron focus. And that's where, you know, one of my things about a year ago I said is I'm going to bring more joy into my life. I'm going to work out what brings me joy now, not what brought me joy 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but right now. So I'm going to try new things and go, we get in programs, well, I can't do that. I've never been good at that. And so on my Wild Women work we do loads of different things, like do clay making, make smudge sticks, do, you know, all these different things, most of which I've programmed myself to go, well, I can't do that. I'm not good. But it's like, I can do anything. I'm going to try it. Because another thing that's so important is that the male view is we go from point A to point B. That's the kind of quite masculine energy. So we do something to achieve this goal. Actually, the feminine energy is I'm going to do something not to get to an end goal, but to be in the moment and experience the feeling. And this is where art has transformed things for me, because I'm not doing it to create anything. I'm doing it for the experience of being in that flow.
So beautifully said. I love how you brought the analogy of the tree and the energy, and it's such a beautiful conversation. I do, however, have to bring it to a wrap. And I know that you've got so much to say and you could go for hours, right? So I want to encourage our listeners, if you want to learn more about what Juliette does and her work, I will leave all the details below. You can absolutely contact her. She also have a beautiful gift to share with you. Do you want to speak to it a little?
Yeah, it's a masterclass on this subject. So within it, there's nutritional information, there's breathwork information with the meditation, and it's a beautiful PDF that you get. So you can sign up for it, and then you'll get access to that. And then there's links in that if you want to work with me further and explore after that point.
So beautiful, such a generous gift. Thank you so, so much. And thank you for taking some time from your busy schedule and being with us today, and for all your wisdom and your energy. It's been really such a pleasure to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm gonna sign off and send all my love and blessings your way until the next time we meet. Ciao.